We're here with Andreas Kling, who's working on Ladybird browser. So let's just get right into it. I'm a programmer. You're a programmer. I'm really interested in understanding. Let's assume the audience doesn't know anything about kind of what you've done so far with Serenity OS. Even like start from the beginning and talk to me about your experiences as a programmer and kind of how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I've been programming since a very early age, and I ended up having a career in big tech, like many others. I, as a teenager, I was really into open source stuff, but then I sort of slipped into a job at Nokia because they were doing some open source stuff, and from Nokia, I slipped into a job at Apple, and because they were also doing some open source stuff, but even within those environments, I was kind of kidding myself because they're not really open source environments. Um, so in 2017, I just felt like I was not compatible with that world anymore. And I had to leave. I didn't really know what to do. I thought I was going to learn another profession. So I went to take some literature classes and stuff. But then I just found myself programming in my spare time anyway and ignoring the homework. So um, started eventually admitting to myself that, yeah, I'm just a programmer. What the heck? And the thing I've been programming professionally for all those years was browsers. So I'd worked at Nokia on browsers. I worked at Apple on browsers. Um, but I still wanted that feeling of like doing something different. So I thought after I left big tech, I'm just not going to do browsers. So I'm just going to do something else. And I couldn't really pick what else to do. So I just thought I would do everything. So I did an operating system and all the applications for it. So that was Serenity OS. And it was meant to be sort of just a playground for myself to relax. And if I would ever get bored of something, I could just do something else because everything is in scope. And then what happened was I am, I guess, a browser programmer at heart. So eventually I started adding a browser to Serenity OS, and then that just became the main focus of what I was doing anyway. And a couple of years later, I have recreated my job as a browser engineer, but now in a completely new browser.
I mean, that's kind of all kind of wind up writing the same things over and over and over again. I think that's been
I guess so.
true for me too. Talk to me more about Serenity OS. So you were using C++, but it was like Serenity's C++ is what I've kind of been told.
Right.
What exactly is going on there?
Well, I wanted to do everything myself because I've always enjoyed like starting things from scratch, like these ultra greenfield projects. And I just decided that C++ was the language I knew, but I'm just not going to use any libraries. So no standard libraries, no like standard templates, anything like that. Just if I want something, I have to do it myself. And so that's sort of how the project started when it was just myself. And it over time evolved into this thing that some people call Serenity C++, which is just C++, the language with all the Serenity standard libraries. And
Okay,
yeah, that's kind of the
that
idea.
makes sense. Yeah, that's always been my kind of opinion of C++ is it's not that bad if you restrict it to a certain like subset
Right.
of the entire C++ standard. Um,
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens in every C++ project. Every project has their own standard library at the end of the day. Like,
okay,
yeah. So ours was no different. Um,
okay. Are you using all the basic same templates for Ladybird too, or
so
are they a little different?
Right. So Ladybird is taking a slightly different direction, but we started with the code base inherited from Serenity OS because Ladybird is a fork of Serenity OS. And then we've just taken out everything that was not a browser. So like the chess games, the Minesweeper, the presentation slideshow tool, all that stuff. Um, and over time, we kind of aim to use more third-party code because there's a huge open source ecosystem of really mature, high-performance libraries that we could totally use. We just haven't because we've been very, very adamant about doing everything ourselves. even if it's strictly worse. We just wanted to do it ourselves anyway. So now we're picking up, like, the usual suspects like libjpeg, stuff like that for JPEG support, um, industry standard libraries for Unicode support, text rendering, things like that. Like stuff that isn't really the core competency of a browser engine team, so that we can instead focus on building a browser. And yeah, so it's a bit of a mindset shift.
Yeah, I mean, there's still lots of good libraries out there that have been kind of kept and maintained well and haven't gotten bloated.
Totally.
What about FreeType? How's that going these days?
FreeType, well, we are not using FreeType directly. We are currently rendering using the Skia library, which is something that spun off from, I think it's something that Google bought a couple of years back.
Okay, so
it was originally just, yeah.
So you're using that library for font rendering.
So we're letting them delegate to other libraries. So I think they delegate to FreeType on our behalf.
Okay, cool. So I guess, kind of the big question. I mean, this is obviously, most people are like, oh, wow, a browser. Yeah, I mean, we've seen the news over the last kind of decade and that, Microsoft has given up, Opera has given up. What makes, I mean, talk about, I guess, one, do you see Ladybird as kind of like just kind of an exercise in programming, or do you see it as a project that you want to win, in the same way Microsoft wanted to win?
Right. So Serenity OS was definitely an exercise in programming. That was leisurely and casual. Ladybird is different. With Ladybird, I want to build something that people would actually use and love and feel good about. And I would like to win, but I'm also aware of our limitations and the sheer scale of our competition. So I'm kind of thinking of it as we don't really need to beat anybody in order for this to be successful. We just need to make something that's useful to people and gain some users who love what we do. So what we really want to achieve is just build a truly independent browser that doesn't have to be loyal to the advertising industry in order to stay afloat. Because I believe that you don't need 1,000 people to build a browser. You don't even need 100 people. You can do it with a small team. But nobody ever tries this because money gets involved so quickly, and then things just blow up before anybody does anything to stop it. So yeah, we've taken a different approach, you could say.
So what do you say about the people? So if you asked Brendan Eich, who runs Brave, he would say, yeah, we're totally independent. Like, sure, we're using Chromium, but whatever they call the project, the open source project at Google, that's the heart of Chrome, right? They'll say we're completely independent. We're just using them for rendering, and we've kind of stripped out why. Like, what? Tell me what you think about that approach and kind of that claim.
I think there's some truth to it. Like, they have some independence because they can take Google Chrome and strip out whatever they want and modify as they like. But at the end of the day, they're always depending on Google for that lunch. Even if they modify the lunch a little bit after they get it. And I think that in order to be truly independent, you just have to have your own engine.
Do you think there's aspects of the code base that kind of make it more difficult for Brave to, be pure in their product and not deliver their consumers to Google advertisers the way they promise, things like that?
I don't know. I think fundamentally the problem that they have is that they want to deliver something right now. They don't want to spend the next 5 years building an engine. They want to ship a product today. And they've done that. And they've gained millions of users. And they've given those users, some increased level of privacy, you could argue, which is a great thing. I just think that this could be taken to far more extreme levels if you are willing to put in the work.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting area. How about I've always, this is kind of my own personal bias, is I feel like the WC3 itself, which is the organization that makes the standards for Chrome to follow, and I guess you to follow, right? Are there aspects of the standards that are too favorable towards Microsoft? Or sorry, towards Google?
Uh, you could probably say that. I mean, if you look at the standardization groups and the organs that actually create these standards, they're Google employees, they're Apple employees, Microsoft employees. So the organizations that build browsers, they generally fund and staff the W3C as well. They have some independent people, but if you look at who's like doing the day-to-day work, like actually writing and updating, editing specs, that's like Google people for the most part. So it's not at all unthinkable that they would also favor Google, even if totally accidentally. You could see how that would happen. Um, and it's certainly the case that we've seen many times that we try to implement something from the spec, and um, we end up having to look at what is Google doing, because it's like kind of hand wavy in the spec. It doesn't really exactly say what you need to do. So the practical answer is, well, just see what Chrome does and try to copy that. And maybe somebody can fix the spec so it says that. That happens pretty much, but I wouldn't say that there's anything really sinister going on. It's more like just the path of least resistance again and again and again sort of accumulates a tilt.
Okay. How about what's going on these days in terms of kind of anti-bot measures that go into browsers? Are you following that, the developments in that area?
Not as closely as I should. I'm kind of I'm not on the cutting edge of browser development these days because we're spending most of our time on like the basics still. So we're not up to date on all the like the latest anti-tracking or the latest tracking technologies. As we make Ladybird more mature, we will have to like actually dig into how these things work. But right now, I have very outdated ideas about like tracking protection, so I'm actually not really qualified to comment on that.
Okay, I mean, to me, this could be one of the key areas that needs to that Ladybird is actually very important for, because my understanding is Google cares quite a bit about bots and people using headless browsers to do things, and um, we want a significant percentage of people to, if Google does something, if when Google gets too much control, they're going to be able to do things that just kind of force you that force them to be able to take control of your entire computer to prove you're actually a real browser, instead of just adhering to standards the way they should. So the new standard will become the standard plus all this extra magic that Google has determined that a real person does that a bot or a headless browser wouldn't do.
Sure, yeah.
So that's a scary future to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's already an issue for us. Not so much Google, but Cloudflare keeps jamming us up because we don't pass their bot checks. They have this mechanism called Turnstile, which is their latest anti-bot technology. And the idea is that you're not supposed to have to like click on all the fire hydrants or the bicycles or whatever. It's supposed to just look at your behavior and mix that together with some browser stats and then figure out, yeah, you're probably a real user.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a reason. It's a hurdle for you to overcome now, and it's also one of the most important reasons that you need to succeed, in my opinion, is that we do want Cloudflare to have to support more than just Chrome users.
Yes, I completely agree with that. It's incredibly frustrating when websites obviously only tested on Chrome, which is something we encounter daily, and that's why our browser has a little debug menu where you can say, pretend to be Chrome. And then magically, more websites work, even though nothing else is different. Because we just say, yeah, we're Chrome, don't worry about it. That's frustrating. And obviously there will always be ways to actually detect Chrome, and Google can always tell people what to do, and many of the big websites will just do what Google says. But I think as long as the W3C exists and there are multiple vendors making browsers, there's at least some market forces keeping Google a little bit honest. I think Apple's position on iOS has been very useful in that way for a long time. And it's actually, I think, concerning in some ways that iOS is going to open up for new browsers, because there's a lot of positive things about iOS allowing Firefox and Chrome and stuff, because it allows Ladybird to go on there one day as well. But the fact that Apple has had a monopoly on iOS has meant that websites had to care about more than one browser. And now the EU is kind of getting in the way of that. So it's an interesting landscape shift happening there.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms right there, because there's lots of malicious compliance going on by Apple, and who knows if we'll actually be able to have a browser on iOS that really isn't Safari. Do you know? Have you been following the? I always find it funny. Nobody really ever talks about allocating executable memory. I think you told me before you're not doing a JIT in Ladybird, but if you wanted to do a JIT, you wouldn't be able to right now on iOS. And does the EU even understand this is an issue that we need to be able to allocate executable memory in our apps, or is this just like they're too dumb to even understand this?
It's that's a multifaceted question. Uh, they seem to have some semblance of technical understanding of what it is that they're legislating. But it's also clear that they have kind of taken Apple's word for a lot of things, um, and sort of deferred to Apple on some of the technical stuff. But I think there's been fairly strong forces against Apple in the EU. There's some advocacy groups like, I forget what they're called, like Open Web Advocacy, something like that, which I don't think they say who funds them, but you could guess. And they've been going pretty hard on Apple in the EU and like showing up to all the hearings and stuff, and grilling them on stuff. So they're probably going to be forced to allow executable memory allocations and stuff like that, just because everybody will say we need it to be competitive.
Okay, I hope that happens. Well, I
Yeah.
always take
At
it
the
with
same
a
time,
grain.
we don't want it.
I don't have. I'm usually pretty pessimistic on regulation, but every now and then, like something great happens. So.
Sure. Yeah, we're good at doing regulation in the EU. That's one of our main skills.
Good and bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about let's move on a little bit. Talk about just kind of like this kind of space that both, FUTO is look in this space. We're funding engineers. We're trying to build products that are competitive with big tech products, but are open source. People can see the source code, whatever you like. I don't know if we want to get into the whole what's the true definition of open source argument today. I don't think it's that useful anymore. But
Right.
we're working on this problem: is how do we get open source software that doesn't suck, that actually has billions of users? And you're trying to do this too. How do you see this? Like, how do we get like? It seems almost insurmountable in some ways. A lot of people don't even care about this problem. When you talk to them who work on these projects, they're like, oh, whatever. We don't want a billion users. We're happy with our, small amount of users, or we're happy that we're happy. How do we get it so that billions of users aren't stuck? Because these billions of users, to FUTO, they're important. We want them to not be stuck using big tech software. We live with these people. They're part of our communities. They vote, etc.
Sure.
So we want all billions of people to be free. How do you see this? How does this get fixed in your opinion? We've kind of come up with some conjectures on our own. I'm interested in what you think.
So this makes me think back on 20 years ago when Firefox came out. and I was really hyped about it. And I was so hyped that I felt compelled to tell everyone in my family about it, because here was something that was so sweet and it had tabs. Like everybody was using Internet Explorer, which didn't have tabs, so I could show people tabs, and I was so excited about it. And somehow that worked. Like all these tech people got hyped up about Firefox and successfully got Firefox to what, like 20-30% market share for a while, which was a resounding success, right? And then, yes, things eventually took a turn when Google came on the scene with Chrome. But I think we can look at what happened there and try to figure out something, because Firefox was just another browser that tech people were excited about. And my thinking is that's kind of what we want to do as well. We want to build a browser and get tech people excited about it, because tech people sort of trickle out into the rest of society if they get excited about something. That's
Okay,
kind
but
of the
then
way
how
I'm
do you
thinking about
stop
that.
what happened? I mean, Firefox had its 2 or 3 years maybe when it was like the best browser. And I mean, I think we should all be like honest. I believe this. Chrome was way better than Firefox when it
Sure.
came. It was like what 2007, I want to say, when it came out, maybe 2006.
2008, I think.
2008.
But
Oh,
yeah,
that
sure.
late.
Yeah.
Okay. So the betas of Chrome, I was just like, oh wow, this is so much faster than Firefox. Did you follow like I guess you were working on browsers at this time. Like how did you perceive that situation? Did you consider that you had to like catch up to Chrome at that point, or was it more, or were people just like, whatever, ours is open sourcey or something, so it's fine.
So this was before I had a real career in browsers. I was just an open source contributor to the Conqueror browser at the time, which was the browser that they forked to make WebKit, which they forked to make Chrome today. So some overlap, but I wasn't really thinking much about that situation at the time. I tried Chrome and I found, wow, this is way better than Firefox, because um, I don't know if you remember when Chrome came out, they had a comic that went along with the release. They had like done this comic where the developers explained what Chrome was and how it
I do
worked.
not remember the comic. I just remember it like taking milliseconds to start instead of seconds to start,
Right. So the thing that
and
impressed,
and milliseconds to load pages.
yeah, it was fast. The thing that impressed me in the comic was that they explained that every tab was a separate process. So that,
That's right. I remember that.
yeah, so if a process would crash or hang or something, it wouldn't bring down the rest of the browser. And as a avid browser of the web myself, I had encountered a fair number of browser hangs and crashes, right? So I thought, this is awesome. I have to use this. It's obviously better than anything else. And then I was just using Chrome for years, for a while. Um,
I still use Chrome.
and yeah, because it was a better product.
So why didn't the Firefox people? Why didn't Mozilla just start? Like, why didn't they work a lot to make sure they didn't lose? Right? They had to know they were losing, and what's going on in that? I was in that situation at Yahoo, and I'll tell you, in 2004 when Yahoo was losing to Google, and yeah, people do just bury their heads in the sand and not even acknowledge it. I wonder if that's what happened at Firefox. You got to work hard to win.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at Mozilla ever, so I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly what was going on. Of course, there is a complicating factor, which is that Google is funding Mozilla,
Yeah, yeah, that's a big problem.
which, makes it really hard, especially from the outside, to understand really what forces were really at play here.
Right. Like I'm wondering if there were like all of a sudden you have a resignation at Firefox and yeah, guys, I'm heading across the freeway.
Right. um, yeah, there was a lot of drama back then. I know that there was also this drama with Steve Jobs because Google was trying to poach some browser people from Apple to work on Chrome, and Steve was mad about that.
Well, they
Um,
got they got in trouble for some of their collusion at that around that time too. maybe a few years before then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were famously trying to poach one of my coworkers, who I don't know if it's public who that was, but yeah, there was a whole mess, and it was all illegal.
Yeah.
Eventually,
So I
was
mean,
decided. So
one of the things I'm getting at here a little bit is like we programmers actually have a lot of power, and when we're good and we go work for Microsoft or we go work for Google, we actually can like fuck things up pretty bad. Um, that's the point I'm trying to make here. So
sure.
as much as FUTO is trying to hire people who do this stuff, I also want us to. I want the engineers who are capable of making the software good and know that it's a bad thing they're doing just for a bigger paycheck. I want them to stop doing that. Like you've been put on this earth to write great software for people. Just do that. Don't worry. And I understand the financial pressures. I do think the people who are capable of this have made a decent amount of money in their career already. And so they might only be trying to make a number go up instead of really needing to, have a college fund. Their kids probably already have a college fund. So yeah, that's kind of like I think that's one of our big messages here at FUTO is if you're a great programmer, stop working for these companies because that's not what you were put on this earth to do. You were put on, like, you are a good programmer. The world needs you to be making good software.
I think that's a very cool thing that you're doing, and I'm really curious what the long-term effects are going to be if you keep throwing these stones in the water and the ripples keep intersecting in interesting ways.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I want to talk to you more about we are trying to have that success, like the sustainability to have engineers get paid by with direct. Kind of the way we see this problem is we have software with hidden agendas now. That's what Chrome is. It's a hidden agenda, right? It's everything Google does is because they want to collect data about you. So they're basically spying on you. And then they want to sell that profile to a marketer, might get something in front of your face, hopefully get you to buy something. So it's that's the way they look at everything. And when you download Chrome, you're just like, hey, when you get an Android for like a $50 Android phone, you're like, hey, this is great. Like all this great software is here for free. And that's the hidden agenda. So like we're trying to, how do we get rid of that hidden agenda? And well, it costs money to make this software. So that's where we've actually parted ways with the OSI and some of those people because we want people to start paying for software and have that, even if it's open source, there's that expectation that you're paying for it.
Yeah, I've read some of your stuff about this. I don't even know what's the latest thing you call it, source first or
Yeah,
something
we
like
call it
that.
source first, and that's basically source first is also open source, but it's some of the open source people consider that dishonest because they've changed the definition around 15 years ago or something,
Sure.
or they think they changed the
Yeah.
definition. So basically, yeah, the source first is basically just saying, as a consumer, you deserve to have like software built for you with no hidden agenda. And obviously that means that you see the source code.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm totally for making money from software in an ethical way, where people know what they're paying for and they understand what they can take it apart and see what it is, right?
So with Ladybird, do you have any plans? I mean, like right now you're taking grants and you have a 501c3 so people can do donations.
Right.
Is that kind of your long-term sustainability model, or do you want to? Is there a chance you might start charging people for Ladybird or something, or trying to have some sort of direct relationship with your consumers?
Right. So our strategy is no monetization.
Okay.
And it's because we believe that a browser is such a fundamental tool for accessing civilizational resources that we don't want to put any kind of gate on that, and we also don't want to put any kind of thumb on the scale in the browser either. So we think that society needs to have a completely open, independent browser that has no commercial interests steering it in any direction. So that's why we say we will never monetize users ever in any way, and we will only take unrestricted donations. Um, and if that means that we have to do this with 10 people instead of 1,000, so be it. Um, and hopefully, our hope is that we will build momentum and get something together that works well enough that more people will want to help us, more people will want to donate, and it will come together in the long run. But it is there's a great element of hope in this, of course.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think that sounds it could plausibly work. You're gonna have fun. To me, it's like your biggest challenge from all these organizations, FUTO, yourself, is going to be how do you recruit these top engineers who, unfortunately, can make, $1 million a year, with the abuse of models at a big tech company, right? So, how do we get those people? That's kind of a big open question. How do we get those people to use their powers for good?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I think there's a truth to that, but I do also think that a lot of those people who work in the big tech or in the FANGs or whatever the abbreviation is nowadays, um, they're also like a bit like drones that they just want to be part of the hive, and they wouldn't function in a more dynamic, independent environment.
Yeah, and that's kind of why things are the drones don't do great software. They do not do delightful software. It really is, and maybe we're past the era. Maybe we don't have any more engaged, what top 1% consumer software developers left at these companies. I mean, that's why we're seeing quality of software decline as much as we have the last few years. Is that yeah, maybe they're not even working on Chrome anymore at Google. Maybe you just have a bunch of drones, which is a nice situation for people who do want to compete from outside.
Well, I will say, I think a lot of the people, there are still a lot of brilliant people working on browsers because I think fundamentally you just have a bunch of smart nerds who get excited about a problem and then they end up wanting to work on it for a long time. But big tech has become very bloated, like teams just get bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
And they just have more and more money. So what's stopping it?
yeah. I mean, it would be cool to. We should maybe try. FUTO should maybe try to reach out and interview some of these engineers at inside these companies. Get them in trouble with HR. Find out what makes them tick. Find out why they're still doing what they're doing.
Well, to your question there about about how do you get people who could make $500,000 a year?
They
How do
can
you
make a
get them
million a
to
year. In my
a million a year? Yeah,
when you
say
count
I
stock
haven't
and
been.
everything, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I haven't been there since the latest inflation bump, so I'm outdated. Um, right. Yeah. How do you get people with that kind of earning potential to leave that behind and go and live in a cave comparatively and work
I
on
don't think it's even
open
no.
source software?
They're not even living in a cave. They're just no. They've already made so much money. They've already made
That's true.
if they're like they're definitely if they're my age, if they're your age even, they've made a lot of money and they can they can they can live just fine. It's not like they'll be starving if they quit their job. They have other people who might be upset with them if they quit their job, but I think they'll be just fine with their with whatever lifestyle they have. But yeah, it's an interesting situation. Let's talk a little bit more about. I want to maybe go back a little bit and talk more about browsers and stuff. I guess one thing we didn't talk about kind of is your targets for Ladybird. It's you're just Linux. You're basically Linux right now, right?
Linux and Mac OS. So we're targeting both of those because they're relatively similar to each other. We want to do Windows, but we don't have any Windows developers at the moment, and there's just so much work to do and just bringing up the engine compatibility anyway. So our view is kind of that we can do Windows, start on Windows in a year or two, and it will be no different than if we start today.
Okay, that sounds good. And then how about mobile?
Mobile, it's kind of the same. We are deferring on that a little bit because we have so much engine work to do. That if we try to do every platform at once, then we will just spread out ourselves a little too thin. Because we are 6 full-time engineers today, as of today. So we already have a lot of things to do. That said, we have the start of a very immature Android port. We have had the browser loading pages on Android, so proof of concept exists, but it needs a lot of polish.
All right. And then do you want to have what's your opinion of PWAs? I'm kind of curious there.
PWAs. I always felt like native apps just feel better. It kind of goes back to that Chrome thing again, where we just have to admit that Chrome was better. I think native apps are generally just better than PWAs at the moment. Now, if you ever say this out loud and a Googler hears you, they will come and say that's because Apple doesn't allow PWAs to succeed. But
wait, but how does Apple affect Google on Android supporting PWA as well?
Because Apple has been neglectful of supporting PWA, the pillars of PWA on iOS, right?
Yeah, but Google can support PWAs as well as they want on Android,
I suppose.
and it's still not working that well. I agree with you. I think PWAs are just like yet another failure of kind of like. The history. I have a history with browsers. So when we first talked, I think I told you I hate browsers, and
Yes.
PWAs is kind of like the latest. And the reason why is not like browsers are great for Wikipedia. I think browsers are great for Wikipedia, and they're great for like Twitter, and they're great for Internet Movie Database. They're great for looking at information. It's when people tried to make them into app ecosystems and operating systems where you just never get it quite as good as a native thing. So it's an interesting, I would love for Ladybird to just be great if Ladybird just stopped at being a perfect way to look at text and like maybe do some basics. I think that would be fine. And you could maybe there's a community of people out there who doesn't want, if you think about all the things that modern browsers can do, there are things that have been mostly abused by, websites to make your experience awful. If you go to a news website these days, it's really hard to read the article. I'd rather just watch a video of someone else summarizing an article than read it on their own website. So.
True.
Anyway, yeah. So maybe that's an opportunity for Ladybird is if it's more focused around just giving people the data they want and actually not adhering to all the standards and maybe not doing all the things and just getting people as quickly as they can to the data they want on the website. I don't know.
Well, I think the problem you run into is in what you said, is that if it could just display documents and text and stuff, plus some basics, the problem happens when you talk about the basics, because every single person on the planet is going to have a different set of just the basics that they want. I just want to read Wikipedia and also check my bank statement. Or I just want to go on Wikipedia and also log into my Warcraft guild or whatever. And eventually you take all of those, they overlap, and you have the whole freaking web anyway.
That's where you need a benevolent dictator who doesn't say yes to everything.
Yes.
I would guess the WC3 has said yes to everything that helps Google make money.
The They don't say no a lot, I guess. But I will say, just in recent days, they've been coming out and saying that what is it, third party cookies have to go away.
Oh, really?
Because Google was on track to get rid of third party cookies for a while until they did a 180 just, I think, 2 days ago or something. They said they decided actually we're not going to get rid of third party cookies. And then the W3C published some big, pretty angry sounding blog for them about how actually third party cookies are bad and they need to go away. So they are standing up against Google.
Okay, okay.
So there's some light,
There's
in this
okay.
weird
All right.
darkness.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
But no, you're not wrong, and it is true that these organizations are staffed by Googlers and they're paid by Googlers and so on. But I don't know. There's always the argument of like, could we do a minimalist web? Like, what could we take away from the web, and it would still be amazing? And let's just make that web instead, without JavaScript, without the CSS. Like, I posted on the internet at one point that every nerd has specific ideas about how he would redesign the web with less complexity.
Yes, that is true. Yes. But
Yes.
none of them do it. None of them do it. Some of them need
Right.
to actually do it. Some of them
Yeah,
have.
because it's such a good daydream.
Some of them have done it, and they've gone off the rails. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you could. For me, I would just start with. I would go look at what Wikipedia allows on their pages, and I would say, "I'll support this." There you go, and then you've got there you go. Start there, and then maybe be very careful about what you support after that.
Yeah, so I think this idea, this way of thinking is fundamentally like good natured and it's like it comes from a good place. But I also think what ends up happening if you follow this to its conclusion is that, okay, now people have your good time browser and they also have to have Chrome because they need to do XYZ every now and then. And then you put your users in this position, right? So our thinking with Ladybird is that let's just support the whole thing, but do it in a good, nice way.
Here's another thing you could do, though. If you did the other thing, your Good Times browser, and then tell other people they're tasked with doing proxies that make websites work with Good Time browser. There you go.
Sure, yeah. Sounds expensive.
I'm just throwing
to
out
get
ideas.
That
That is true. I'm throwing out crazy ideas now. So. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about, Andreas? Like, I mean, we can wrap up if there's.
Well, one thing I've always wondered is what does FUTO stand for?
4 letters that sound great together. It's very simple. Yes.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yes.
About the tech oligarchy.
Yes. We don't like the tech oligopoly here at FUTO.
The oligopoly, right? My bad. No, I think it's interesting, this thing that you talk about getting people who work in that comfortable environment to realize that they could go do something else. And how do you motivate them? Because I can speak for myself. I was in that comfortable environment, but I was kind of, in a very messy way, got out of it because I had problems with drug addiction and disillusionment and all kinds of things. And I don't think everybody has to go through that in order to break out of big tech. But you do probably need some sort of mental paradigm shift to even entertain the idea that you could leave such a comfortable environment. And yeah, how do you shock people into it?
A big part of it is a lot of people don't get kind of an innate sense of worth based on kind of they get their sense of worth based on external cultural signals. And part of the problem is, if you're just graduated from college and you tell your grandma that you got a job from Google, she's going to be thrilled. Whereas, if your grandmother actually knew what Google was up to, like if you told your grandmother you were going to go work for a drug dealer, your your grandmother would be upset with you, right? But how is that different than going to work for Google? It's kind of the same thing. Um, so that's that kind of culture needs to be fixed, I think, to really get these people. Like a lot of people are just like, hey, yeah, what my grandmother thinks it's cool. Like my wife thinks it's cool. The chicks will think I'm cool. Like whatever.
Chicks think you're cool if you work at Google?
I would think so. Well, some of them would. Okay, maybe they won't think you're cool, but they'll be maybe, I don't know. I'm not one to talk about these things, but
For sure, yeah.
yeah.
I was just a little surprised.
Yeah.
It didn't match my experience working in big tech.
I mean, I would definitely. I got some of that. I remember when I first told my mom that I was dropping out of grad school to work for Yahoo. Um, it was Yahoo was not big tech at the time. Yahoo was like the scrappy upstart that nobody had heard of. And my mom was like, "What are you doing? Like, this is stupid." And I was like, "Hey, we're gonna beat AOL, stuff like that." Um, so yeah, you have to have kind of your own sense of worth. I think that's part of it.
Well, I mean, I can't say that I've ever succeeded in luring anybody out of there. I've talked to some people and they're just real attached to their big tech comforts. Um, but so what I generally do is I end up working with a lot of younger people who are a bit more energetic about open source and independent software, that kind of stuff. And they just kind of naturally find themselves in my projects anyway, because um, that's more interesting to them. And that's something I guess I would say I do love that the new generation is really excited about software, independent software, open source stuff, just like we were. That doesn't go away.
That's awesome. How many? We're near UT here in Austin, and yeah, we've got a lot of interest from a lot of the best students at UT. Just like, yeah, this is like, and they are in that situation. Like some of them who are graduating are like, oh yeah, I've got to decide between doing something that I think is cool or just going to work for a financial, analysis company or whatever. That's very boring to them, but very stable. So yeah, no, yeah. I mean, a good programmer does get excited about these things.
So do you think that's a reasonable solution to this? Is just go after young people and try to get them interested on this path early
Yeah, I
on?
mean, it's probably the best. I mean, unfortunately, it takes a lot of time. But like any strategy that involves like everyone over the age of 25 is a lost cause means that you don't solve it for 20 years. But maybe that's the case.
Yeah, we'll see. But I'm optimistic. We have a lot of older people working on our projects as well. I've recently been able to hire some older developers as well. Well, I say older, but like 40, around
That's
40-ish,
that's very old
my
for
own
a
age.
program. That's very old for a
It's pretty
programmer.
older,
Yeah.
right? Um, but no, I find that it just adds a lot of maturity to the project to have older people working on it. So it's absolutely necessary. You can't do this with just young people. You need some old people as well.
All right. Well, cool. I mean, we're looking forward. 2026 is when we're supposed to see a public release, right?
Yeah, we're doing an alpha in 2026 is our goal. So we have a pretty ambitious roadmap, alpha in 2026, then beta next year, and then public release year after that. And we're doing a more detailed breakdown of this roadmap, but we're still working on that one. But I think some people, they see our roadmap and they say, wow, that's way too long. Why do you even talk about it now? But if you look at the complexity that goes into a browser, then
Well, I assume
it'll
you're
take
also
time to
trying
build
to
one.
help people to help you too. So
Yes, indeed, indeed. No, but we're very optimistic about it.
all right, cool. Well, we wish you best of luck here at FUTO, and we want to stay in touch, obviously, and this is going to be fun trying to get these things built, trying to win. We want to win.
Totally. Yes. And before I go, thank you so much to FUTO for sponsoring our project and supporting us. It's really great. I think what you guys are doing is a great thing as well. So I'm really glad that we could align on this thing. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.